Okay, so what I'm going to try and show today is how to set up a JavaFX project with IntelliJ. So first thing I would suggest is this is obviously going to be a much bigger project. And before you start any projects like this, I would always recommend that you make sure your IntelliJ is completely up to date. You're using the latest Java development kit. And there's also another piece of software called Scene Builder, which I'd also recommend you make sure is the most recent one if you've already got that installed. So to do this on IntelliJ, once you get to this screen, you can go here and check for updates before you create a new project. If you're already inside of a project, normally in the bottom right-hand corner, either here or in the actual project window, you'll see like a little orange arrow. And that's the one that you would want to use then to check. For Java JDK, if you just do a Google search for Java JDK, you'll get the Java Oracle's downloads. On here, at the time of recording, Java 17 is the most stable version. Java 19 is the most recent version. So you can choose which one out of those two you'd prefer. Make sure you set your right operating system. So for me, it'd be Windows. And then this would be the one I would download and install for Windows. If I was on Mac, it depends on how new your Mac is. The newer ones, you would want this one, I think. Can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest. I might need to double check. Or it'd be one of these two anyway that you'd need to download and install. In terms of Scene Builder, so this is a JavaFX editor. You would click on Scene Builder, download now, and then you've got your Windows installer. Okay, this is for the older Macs with the Intel chip. This is for the newer ones with the new Apple Silicon CPUs, and then install those as well. Now, with all of that set up, this should be a relatively simple process. So let's have a go. So you can see my version of IntelliJ is 2022.1.3. I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to click a JavaFX project. I'm going to give it a name. Now, the location of where this is going is going to be really important. Okay, you've got to know where you're actually saving these projects on your computer. Okay, so make sure you take a note of the location of your projects. For me, I'm putting them on my desktop into a folder called Java projects, and then it will create another folder with this here. So we're going to be using Java. I keep it on Maven here. I'm going to keep this the same. And then here, I should be able to choose my new JDK version. And then next. Now, until you become more experienced with JavaFX, I would suggest not ticking any of these. Okay, as you become more kind of accomplished with it and you want to maybe use some more advanced tools or libraries, then you can look to add in these later on. But for the standard ones, you should be fine. Okay, so that's the project created. And you can see it's indexing at the moment, so we won't be able to run anything until it's finished indexing. Okay, but to give you an idea while that's going on of what we've got. So if we look in the source folder, okay, and our resources. So this is, we've got a one basically page application at the moment. And if I double click on this, you will see this one is here. This is our main launcher that we need in all Java projects. Okay, and this calls a function called launch, and that will run eventually. It will go through a different phase, but it will come back and eventually load this, which will start our JavaFX project. So this tells it which file that we're going to load. Now, these are new files. These are FXML files, and these describe how the graphical user interface looks. If I show you what it looks like in code, it looks like this. If you've used any XML or HTML, you might be kind of familiar with the style that it's using. Now, some people do become an expert at how to code this, but because we're going to use Scene Builder, you won't really need to know what's going on here. So we can pretty much ignore anything that we see in here. There will be a couple of things I might point out later, but generally you won't need to edit this. So that's going to load that file first. Okay, it's going to set the width and height for the window. It's going to set the title of the window. Okay, and then it loads the scene and shows it. So FXML, JavaFX kind of works like you would imagine a theatre production. We have a stage and we have different scenes. So we load the scene onto the stage and then we show the stage to the user. Now, if I run this program here, okay, so this is the one that's been created and we've got a single button that reacts, welcome to JavaFX. So where's the code then that's making this button react? This was only loading and setting up the first stage. Where does the interaction happen here? Well, as I said before, this is the look of this is defined by the FXML. But every single one of these scenes should have its own controller. And just to say that again, each scene has its own controller. I see a number of students that will try and set up one controller to control multiple scenes. It doesn't work very well. It gets very, very confusing very quickly. So one scene, one controller. And when I mean controller, there's a Java file that has an association with this FXML. If we actually go back here, as I say, you won't need to really understand what's going on here too much. But you can see this FXML has been set a controller. And in this one, the controller is this hello controller. So if we follow across on the left-hand side, we've got com.example.javafx tutorial. Inside of that, we have the hello controller. And that's what this is here. Now, every time you're referring to a widget on the FXML user interface, we have to put FXML. And what this has done is created a link to the label called welcome text on that form. Then you'll see here, if I format this a little bit easier for you to see, there's a function that's been assigned to the button. And if we look on here, we'll see there's a button somewhere. Here it is. Here's the button. And here's the on action. On action, it's going to run a function called on hello button click. Now, again, you won't have to hand code this, so don't worry too much. I'm just pointing out you can see the connections. So here it is on hello button click. And then it changes the label welcome text and sets it to welcome to JavaFX application. So if we run it again. Okay, so there's the button. When it clicks, it's going to run this function, which will change a label that's here, which at the moment doesn't have anything on it. Okay, and that comes up. So how do we go about editing the JavaFX XML? Well, this is where we're going to use Scene Builder. So I'm going to open a project, and this is where I said to you, you need to remember where you saved your work, because we're going to need to go and find that fxml file. So I'm going to go to desktop for me, Java projects, JavaFX setup tutorial, and then I can follow on the left-hand side here where I need to go. So source, main, resources, example, JavaFX tutorial, and there is that file, the fxml file. And I'm going to open that. So this is what the form looks like in design. Okay. Over here, you have containers where you can place your controls, or you could kind of think of these as like the boxes and things that we were using on GUI 0 if you were here in year 11 for the graphical user interfaces. So these are the things that kind of control the layout of the widgets. And in this case, the widgets are called controls. And if we look here, you've got all the different types of controls that you would need here. Now, for most of the things that you're going to do, that's the only two areas that you need to really look in. Gluon gets some more advanced controls. Menu allows you to start adding some menus across the top. This is something you might need to look at. And then the other things, to be honest, I haven't even looked at that much myself. These are obviously some drawing tools, some charts if you want to use some charts, and some 3D objects down here where you can kind of have ambient lights and cameras, but I think this is going to be way beyond anything you need for the IB side of things. So let's just make a change to the control. So let's put another button on there. So I would move the button onto here. Okay, the button is down here. I can rename it. This is where I can change all the properties of the button. Okay, and what it looks like. Down here, the code is where I can set an action. So you see, the moment I clicked in here, it can only at the moment see that one function that we've created in the controller. When you create more functions, you'll get a list of all the functions you've created. So on action is basically when anything happens. If you want a more specific action, then you can actually look down and there'll be lots of different things that it can record depending on what the user does to that control. The only other thing I need to show at the time being is the controller. And if you go down here, so if you do create another FXML, make sure you save it in the same folder. And this is where you would assign the controller to it. Okay, so that's where that gets picked up. Now, if I save this, the great thing is if I come back here, look at the FXML, you will see that the new button code is automatically being inserted. I didn't have to actually write this code myself. And if we now were to run the application again, we've got our second button here. You'll notice the size looks different on here. That's only because we set the size here. That's what's controlled the size difference between what we're seeing here and what we're seeing here. Okay, obviously to get good at this, you're going to have to get used to looking at the JavaFX documentation and getting used to looking at the controls to see what they can do. But this should get you started and get you set up with your first project.